We need to see Grandma Hetty burn alive into a complete, charred, unidentifiable body. I don't know. Like, I don't know if it needed to go that far. I feel like it went on too long. Like the burning of Grandma Hattie went on too long, where it felt a little bit exploitative. I do feel like seeing Grandma Hattie burn alive, like seeing the flames come up around her, I think was a nice. I think it was nice at first. I think then when it goes on for like, I'm like, okay, we're just gonna sit here and watch this black woman burn to death. Like it just sort of like okay, and then we see her body sort of crumple to the floor, and it's all charred and it's unrecognizable and unidentifiable, and it's just kind of like, was this necessary? What up, everybody? It is your boy Jabbar, the Kakashi Cowboy, back with another review of Lovecraft Country, episode 9. I think this is the ninth installment, and so therefore the season finale will be on sometime this week coming up. If I'm going to be honest, I really haven't enjoyed fully an entire episode of Lovecraft Country since like episode 4. Like the first 4 episodes of Lovecraft Country I thought were just so well done, and they really set the bar high for me in terms of like just good storytelling, good character development. I sort of want to do this episode on a character by character basis, starting with Christina and Ruby first, just to get them out the way, because I feel like I've spent so much time already sort of nailing in this we're nailing in this point from the very get-go. People are just surprisingly just now starting to realize that Ruby is problematic, because she came out and outright said that she pretty much hates herself, that she always envisioned being a redhead as a white woman, and that she has no problem with Christina killing Tick in order to be an all-powerful feminist, like peak white feminist, Nazi, Aryan race, Hitler youth, a witch. Yeah, it seems like her plan is in full effect. You know, she sort of manipulated the whole situation, used sort of Diana's current situation, because Diana, if you remember, episode 8, you know, she essentially got cursed by the Lancaster guy, who spit on her and said a whole bunch of like devil worshipping magic stuff, and then he cursed her to sort of be haunted by, you know, minstrel characters of herself, you know, pickaninnies, jigaboos, and all this other stuff. These sort of minstrel show characters that haunt black people in everyday life, because they are stereotypes that follow us around, that even get us killed, if you remember Emmett Till. And now it is sort of infecting Diana, and it is actually turning her into one of the Pickaninny girls. We see her sort of go through the transformation. Her arm is shriveling up where she got cut at by the girls and their long nails. Getting seen, we start to see her transform. Her hair becomes unruly and matted. She starts her eyes, of course, you know, are kind of like cat eyes. She starts getting those teeth. Her mouth is sort of overdrawn. Tina is taking full advantage of the situation, essentially telling Tick that, you know, she will reverse the magic. Well, she can't even reverse the magic, if we're being honest. She can only just restart the process until they find the book to actually get the words from the Braithwaite, the Book of Names, so that then she can actually use that book to then reverse the magic and the curse that was done, which she plans on using to, of course, make herself the all immortal. She already has the orrery, and she has the other pages, the lost pages of Braithwaite, and now they go and they get her the book of names of Braithwaite as well, when they travel back in time to Tulsa, back in 1921, to go and get it. You know, before we see them even complete the spell that's going to reverse the magic back to its original state, so we can start the spell all over again, we see that Christina tells them that we need the blood of a closest relative in order to do that. Of course, everybody is thinking, like, because Hippolyta's not here, she hasn't gotten back yet, they're looking at Montrose, and Montrose is, of course, he's drinking a little bit. He's drinking a couple sips of, like, I think it might be vodka or something like that. Tick and Montrose have already sort of had their reconciliation moment, if you remember last episode, where they talked about their differences and they seem to have squashed it. Well, that doesn't last very long, because then Montrose, he is sort of forced to tell Tick, in order to save Diana's life, that he might actually, because Hippolyta's not here, that he might actually have to give the blood, because he might actually be Diana's brother, because he might be George's instead of his. And we see Tick look really heartbroken about this. He starts crying. He starts just sort of thinking about his life all over again. I feel like every time Montrose mentions something or tells him a family secret, like he just starts reconsidering all the things he thought about his life, and all the, stuff he thought he knew to be true and it wasn't true, and all the stuff that he did out of spite and out of anger and all the stuff that happened to him. And he just sort of starts breaking down crying. And then we see Letty come in. But then, of course, right after that, Hippolyta, of course, appears out of nowhere. I really love the soundtrack. It's like goes like dun, dun, dun. This is right after Montrose tells him. So Montrose really didn't even have to tell him. He just had to wait a few more seconds for Hippolyta to show up. But of course, it's supposed to be a sort of dramatic irony. Like, of course, Montrose tells him, and then right after Montrose tells him, Hippolyta just appears and is like, "What's wrong with thee?" And she's really like, no nonsense. Like, she's like, "I left you niggas for a couple of days with my daughter, and you guys have pretty much gotten her cursed." And risked her entire life. See Hippolyta go with Christina. She really doesn't ask a whole lot of questions. She's just like, okay, we gotta do what we gotta do. You know, she doesn't really explain anything either. First the spell started back over. Hippolyta has changed a lot. Like, she's kind of like a no nonsense person. Like, she doesn't have time for people's bullshit. She's not gonna baby people anymore. She's not gonna be like, you know, like most women, black women we see in these roles who are sort of Hippolyta started out as this a little bit. I don't want to say she was a mammy character, but you could easily see Hippolyta's character with different writers if the writers in the room weren't black women, and they would easily make her into the typical mammy character who's loving and nurturing and all of this stuff. And we see Hippolyta, she's made this complete transformation where she's like, no, I'm smart, I'm intelligent, I'm very capable, I'm just as important and a part of this team and this family as anybody else, and you're going to respect me as such. Stop asking fucking questions. This is what it is. This is what it's going to be. And she lays out on her law. She says, get in the fucking car. I'm going to save my fucking daughter and get this shit right. She's not just here to sort of stroke anybody's ego. And she's really, you know, grown immensely in terms of, you know, her character arc, you know, from whence we saw her in the first episode to somebody who would, like, you know, sort of go along with whatever George wanted, or okay, I won't go, to now, like, you know, I'm going, I'm making the plan, this is the plan, and you're going to follow it. I would have personally liked to see her travel, to see what it looked like, how she actually got back. Like, I don't know if we're just supposed to assume that she got back the same way she did when she was jumping around, like she just wished herself or, you know, willed herself to be wherever she wanted to. Like, I'm wondering if that's what she did. We don't really get any sort of explanation, or we don't get any insight to see the sort of time travel that she does to get back to, you know, her original Earth. You know, she tells us that she was on Earth 504, where she could sort of will herself into any dimensional multiverse. And so I would have personally liked to see, you know, Hippolyta, like, you know, transport back. She sort of has a plan. She's going to send them back to Tulsa, 1921, where they said that the book was last seen. Hippolyta, you know, opens the portal for them using all of her knowledge. You know, she tells them, I'm going to use all of my knowledge to save my daughter. I'm going to send you guys back to whence you came. She sort of starts messing with the machine, even beating up the machine a little bit to sort of get where she wants to go. She injects some of the wires into her arms. And she's sort of just like powering the machine herself with her own sort of essence, which I thought was really cool. And she's going to hold the portal open so for as long as they need, so that they can go back and get the book and then come back with it before it burns in the fire. And so we see them jump in. Montrose, Michael K. Williams is I think Michael K. Williams is an underrated actor, and he really deserves a lot of awards. I mean, he deserves so many awards. His performance has been impeccable. This scene, he's looking completely distraught. He's sort of having these sort of traumatic flashbacks where we get these auditory sounds of what happened that day when Tulsa burned and the Tulsa massacre happened. And he's just sort of looking distraught. His face says so much without saying anything at all. Tick, surprisingly, in this moment, is really getting on my fucking nerves. Like, it's understandable, like, that he's upset. And actually, it's funny because Hippolyta tells them, like, whatever shit y'all got going on, cut that shit out, because my daughter's about to die and we have a fucking job to do. So leave that shit here and go do what you need to do. Of course, Tick does not leave it. Tick, who was, you know, I thought was going to be one of my favorite characters of this series. They made him so utterly annoying They've made him so utterly insufferable. Like he's so overly emotional, and I'm not saying that in a way. I'm not saying that in a way that's like, oh, he's too in touch with his feelings, because he's not really in touch with his feelings because he doesn't really deal with his feelings in a very productive manner. Like he's always just sort of goes straight to anger. Like it's just sort of ridiculous. Like Tick, you've betrayed people too. You've kept secrets. You still keep secrets. So like Tick, you've kept secrets too. It's not like you've been like the most greatest person ever. You fucking killed people in Korea for no fucking reason. Who are you to judge anybody? Like, I understand that he's upset, but it's just like he has no empathy whatsoever. He's so selfish and so overly emotional, and you just never know which Tick you're going to get at any moment. And he's just become so utterly insufferable. I just cannot stand Tick in this moment. Like, he has some redeeming qualities about himself eventually, but the process to getting there, like, he has to, of course, cause all this drama and all this mess before we ever get to reconciliation. We have to go through all this toxic masculine bullshit of anger, aggression, and violence, and it's just like, oh my goodness, can we please stop? You've done this throughout the entire season, enough to have enough empathy for your dad. Like, if anybody you should be mad at in this moment about, the whole thing about you being George's son, you should be mad at Uncle George because Uncle George never claimed you. Your father did. I mean, though Montrose, even though he was a shitty dad, he was a shitty dad for many reasons, for many sort of traumatic reasons that he's faced in his life. But that's why I like Montrose, because he's a very like sympathetic character. Like I really connect with Montrose on a level of tortured soul. Like he's a very tortured soul, and I have to admit that I am drawn to like tortured soul characters. Uncle George didn't want to claim your ass, and your mother, she cheated. So it's like, I don't understand, like, why are you mad at Montrose and why are you taking it out on Montrose? You guys just had a nice reconciliation moment. Like, I understand you're going to be upset, but it's just like, he holds so many grudges. It's just like, Tick, can we please get over it this one time? Can you please deal with your issues in a productive manner for once? For once, please. Instead, he starts picking on Montrose and talking shit about him, how he's not really his father, and we're done after this. Like, how many times is Tick gonna tell his dad that we're no longer, we're done after this? It's just like, it just gets old, and I feel like it's also bad writing. I also have to say this as well. This is not just about Tick itself. This has to do with the writers. I think that they want to make a critique about toxic masculinity, but it's not working. I feel like it's just become annoying. Like, I think it's fine if you want to make a critique about toxic masculinity, but there's a better way to do that than just keep reoccurring and rehashing the same old shit over and over again that we've seen for the last couple episodes. And we've seen this behavior from Tick so many times. Are we going to see a change in his behavior? Are we going to see a character arc where he grows and progresses? Are we? Are we ever? Are we ever? I don't know. I don't know. Are you guys going to let him? I don't know. Are the writers? Writers, I'm asking you, are you going to let Tick have a moment of growth? Montrose takes Letty and Tick back to his house where he grew up. We see the sort of very traumatic scene again. We see, Montrose has to face all of these things at once. He has to face the racism of what happened at Tulsa. He also has to face the homophobia of what happened in Tulsa because he was beat by his father and berated by others for essentially being, essentially he says the F word. We come to a scene, his father is outside. Actually, the dude from Black Lightning is his father. Why do they always make him sort of an abusive, abusive dude? But anyway, he's playing an abusive father, and he comes and he takes a switch off the tree and starts beating Montrose with it. Montrose tells Tick and Letty anyway that he caught me wearing George's suit and corsage, and he thought I was too girly. He thought that I would use the flower to put in my hair or something, or behind my ear or something like that. And he thought that, that suit was for a real man and not for somebody like him. Tick's mother come in to his defense, like, hey, stop beating your son. You always beating him. You're always beating him. You need to stop doing that. And so we see the father even aggressively move towards her. And then her father steps out and is like, yo, touch your kids. You can touch your kids if you want to. Touch my kids, I'm gonna shoot your ass. We see a young George come out. He's asked, Tick's mother, does she want to go to the prom with him? Of course, we know that the prom has already been canceled because two girls that we see in the hotel room back where they sort of end up and land up when they, travel through the time portal, and jump through it, to the time ripple. Walk by the room and start talking about how it's closed because of the threat of like a white mob coming or white people or something like that, and they're like, white people ruin everything. I feel like this series is also trying to make subtle critiques of Uncle George as well. That Uncle George, he's, even though he comes, we see this sort of loving version of him in the beginning, and we're so sort of heartbroken to lose him in that like second or third episode. We sort of get this backstory of maybe he wasn't the best guy. Like, not that he was such a horrible person, but just that he made some mistakes. He wasn't perfect. He made a lot of mistakes. He was a coward in some senses. He didn't stand up when he needed to. He didn't speak out when he needed to. He was too quiet. He was too go along to get along. And that the guy that we come to know, or we thought we knew, isn't who we actually thought he was. And I really love those subtle critiques in there. Montrose runs off. He goes and runs off to try to find not him, his younger self, and also George and his wife, because during this time, he remembers that they were, sort of, mauled by a white mob that came after them. That one of his sort of friends, Thomas, got shot. That actually during the time of the Tulsa massacre, Tulsa riots, whatever you want to call it, well, not whatever you want to call it, it is the Tulsa massacre, that this white mob sort of descended upon them, on Montrose and Thomas first. Thomas was actually meeting up with Montrose because he was gay, and because he wanted more than a friendship. He wanted sort of them to be together. And Montrose, essentially, he remembers, he's sort of getting this moment, he's sort of remembering this moment the hardest, because during all of this racial violence, there's also homophobic violence is going on as well. He tells his best friend, well, he tells us that he's telling his best friend, he tells Tick that he's telling his friend Thomas that, he's no, faggot, essentially, he's not gay, and that they can no longer be friends. And that right after he tells him this, the white mob ascends upon them. They start holding each other's hands. They sort of, in this moment when the white mob sort of descends upon them, they sort of have this sort of come togetherness. They sort of cling on to each other, hold hands. Montrose tells us that, they barely even held hands in public, but they just felt the need to hold hands together in that moment, because they're all that they had in that moment. That the white man, he yells nigger faggot as he shoots Thomas in the face, and he's gone forever. And pretty much the last moment, Montrose is really, he doesn't say it, but you can really tell it from his face. He's really regretting this moment in his life, because the last thing he said to his friend was essentially, he denied himself. That's the one thing, the crime he committed. But the other crime he committed was, putting down his friend, who was simply trying to sort of, extend him an olive branch and to let him know that he wasn't alone. That moment where Montrose, witnesses Thomas get shot in the face, and after he just told him that he was, an F word and all that other stuff, essentially is where, Montrose lost his innocence, and it just all went to shit. Finally, him and Tick have another reconciliation moment. I'm like, how many more of these are we gonna have? Montrose says he always leaves out the part of the story where, this sort of unknown black man comes and sort of beats the shit out of all these white people and protects them and defends them, and that's how they get out of Tulsa alive, essentially. Tick picks up that bat and beats the shit out of these white people. I wish he would have beat the shit out of that white woman a little bit more. I'm just going to be honest, like, she did not get enough of an ass beating for me. If your ass want to be out there terrorizing black people and terrorizing children and trying to lynch and shoot and maim and kill and all this other stuff, your ass can get more. All she got was a little shove and a push. She should have got a beat down. You guys let me know what you think about it down in the comments below, because I don't have any sort of sympathy. Letty, during this whole time, she is with the family. A white mob has chased her to their house in their house direction. Letty, of course, they start shooting at Letty. Of course, Letty has the invulnerability spell on her, so it just knocks her down. The force of the bullet, I think, knocks her down, but she doesn't actually get shot. That's when actually we see Montrose's father come out with a shotgun. Also, Tick's mother's father come out with a gun as well. They herd everybody back into the house. They shoot back at the white men. It was so nice to see like black people fighting back. Like so many times, they just like to see black people were just sort of like, I don't know, like just sort of lackadaisical, just sort of like timid and tepid, and we didn't fight back, and we just got ran over. No, niggas fought all the time. We had to fight. We were forced to fight and for our lives. So like, I'm glad that they showed that aspect of it. Grandma Hattie, who is the grandmother of Tick's mother, you know, sort of looks up Letty up and down. She's wearing tennis shoes. She's wearing an old-fashioned dress, but she's wearing tennis shoes. And Grandma already kind of peeped. There's something wrong with this woman. They sort of give everybody a gun, like men, women, and children. Everybody got to carry a gun. We're all going to be stationed at different points of the house, protecting it and guarding it. And then if we can't make our way out of here, we'll make a run for it and all that sort of stuff. We of course know. We already know what's going to happen. We know that they're going to burn alive, but we don't know how. We don't know. And Letty is also very cautious of trying to change the future. And so essentially she gets alone at one point and she's able to sort of start looking for the book. Of course, Grandma Hattie already suspects that, you know, she's up to something. Like, this woman is weird. Who is this Negro woman? And so she meets her upstairs. She sees her rummaging through their stuff. Even that, like, she's like, what are you doing? And she immediately puts up her gun. Like, Grandma Hattie does not play. She does not play no games. Who are you and where are you from? And Lady goes ahead and tells her the whole spiel about how she's from the future, about how she's carrying her great grandchild and all that other good stuff, and how she needs the book to help you know, a cousin of hers in the future because she's been cursed, and they need this magic spell book that's been passed down in her family from generation to generation. Grandma Hattie tells her essentially, you know, after a little while of being convinced of this, you know, Grandma Hattie tells her essentially that, you know, she was ordered never to open the book, just to keep it safe. And so she gives the book to Letty. And she says, you know, I'm going to die here, aren't I? We're going to die here, aren't we? And, you know, Letty doesn't really say too much, but it's pretty much like, yeah, I know we're going to die here. Let these final moments be, you know, my hope reborn into flesh when you pass through that portal, when you get on the other side. And it's a really lovely moment, a really lovely scene. I think we see sort of, you know, I'm not really into deaths like that. In terms of Grandma Hattie's death in this moment, where she sort of burns alive, we sort of see her burn alive in the way that we sort of saw Letty burn alive in her dream, or Tick even before her. I think I teeter between this was somewhat crass, but also somewhat powerful. I haven't really made up my mind on what it is yet. I don't know. Do we need to see Grandma Hattie burn alive into a complete, charred, unidentifiable body? I don't know. Like, I don't know if it needed to go that far. I feel like it went on too long. Like, the burning of Grandma Hattie went on too long, where it felt a little bit exploitative. I do feel like seeing Grandma Hattie burn alive, like seeing the flames come up around her, I think it was nice at first. I think then when it goes on for like, I'm like, okay, we're just gonna sit here and watch this black woman burn to death. Like, it just sort of like, okay, and then we see her body sort of crumple to the floor, and it's all charred and it's unrecognizable and unidentifiable, and it's just kind of like, was this necessary? I'd rather seen Letty run. Like, because we've seen her, but I understand why they're doing this, because at the beginning of the episode, at the beginning of the season, you know, that first episode, if you remember, we see Letty running, but in this one, this sort of penultimate episode before we get to the final one, which is coming up in a couple of days, we see her walking. I think it was supposed to be powerful, but I would have liked to see this scene sped up a little bit. Even though it was beautiful to see her walk through the flames and all this other stuff going on and being vulnerable, maybe she should have walked briskly, like, you know, like a power walk, you know, or something like that, because it was sort of, you know, Hippolyta was sort of losing control of keeping the time ripple open and the multiverse open, and so we see Hippolyta also. I think that was also a very powerful moment when Hippolyta sort of uses all of the energy, all of her essence to sort of keep this portal open, because it closes for a second. Tick goes through to sort of coach Hippolyta into like keeping it open, and she's like, oh! Her eyes turn white. Her hair turns blue. Like she's a real life. Hippolyta turns into a real life superhero, and I hope that it doesn't stop here. Like I hope we get to see the further extent of her powers, if you want to call them that, as we move into like the final showdown of the final episode of this season. But yeah, like I said before, my final thoughts about some of the things that I do have some issues that I want to address a little bit about what we haven't gotten to know yet. I think that's been bothering about this whole entire season is the fact that we don't know why Tick's mother died. We don't know how she died at all. Why has that been left a mystery? Why hasn't that been spoken about? If it has and I just missed it, please let me know down in the comment section below. But that's been bothering me a little bit. Also, Jihad came and left. I mean, what was the purpose? What was the purpose of Jihad being here this season? Other than, I mean, we got a good episode. I thought that her episode was really cool. It had nothing to do with the plot. She was literally used as a plot device simply to sort of cause a rift between Letty and Tick for 5 minutes. Like, what was the purpose of Jihad if she's not coming back in this final showdown episode? What was the purpose of Jihad? Are you going to do a spinoff? Are we going to get a spinoff? Are we going to get a spinoff? Are we not? If we're not going to get a spinoff, I'm kind of pissed off. I've also been saying that there has been no mention or sort of context for the fact that, you know, we haven't really gotten into the family dynamics of Letty and Ruby at all. The brother has sort of gone away. We haven't even revisited, you know, her brother again. You know, we saw him for one episode for a moment where they're arguing and fighting, and then he's just sort of not in the picture anymore. He has nothing to do with anything. And it's just like, okay, we're not going to go with the fact that her two brothers and sister are dark-skinned and she's light-skinned. We're not going to go into the fact that, you know, Letty might be clearly to me is sort of, you know, is symbolic that she is mixed. It is representative of the fact that she is mixed. I don't understand how, I just don't get it. Like, she's so much lighter. She looks so much different than her brother and sister, but they've never talked about it. They also don't talk about colorism as well. They also have not talked about colorism also. They haven't really even talked about it either. And it's just weird to me because now you've given this sort of, you know, and I'm not mad at Letty for getting the invulnerability spell, but like you've given this light-skinned woman protection that other black women don't have, that other dark-skinned women don't have, and you haven't really explained or gone into the fact that like there's colorism going on here. And I've been asking this for a long time now, and like you haven't addressed it. The spin-offs that I would love to see, I'd love to see a spin-off of Montrose. Love to see a spin-off of Montrose. Love to see a spin-off of Diana and her mother, Hippolyta. I would love to see a spin-off of that. I would love to see George Freeman. If we ever, is George Freeman ever going to, like, we get George Freeman referenced, like, you know, Tick's son. We get him referenced in the future, but are we ever going to see him? Like, I would love to get that one. I would love to get that sort of, you know, spin-off of like Letty, you know, raising George, you know, maybe by herself if he does die, if Tick does die, or if he doesn't die, or sort of an alternate reality where they actually end up changing the future. Like, I would love to see it. I would love to see it, but I don't know if we're going to get these things. But let me know in the comments section below what you guys thought about this episode and everything that I've sort of said over the course of this review. And I will see y'all next time for the next video for the very last installment of Lovecraft Country. It has been a pleasure.